Hi, my name is Lisa Silliman French, and I'm a faculty emerita from Texas Women's University. And I get to present today with.
Hi, I'm Amanda Young. I'm an assistant professor at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania.
This is a really exciting topic for both of us because this is an area that we both really like. And this is my favorite topic. So we're going to talk about assessment and what is appropriate. This is really important. And so we're excited to talk to you about this presentation. So I'll start out with, as an adaptive physical education teacher, we have a lot of roles that we have to play. And so we have different hats that we need to wear. We're going to teach, we evaluate the students, assess them, we disseminate information. Communication is a key to our success, and everything in the area of assessment specifically, we have to make sure that you communicate. When you're going to assess the child, you need to talk to your teachers, principals, parents. We provide different services, direct, consult. We collaborate with in sporting activities with physical education teachers, all types of people, all just for this one child. And we also provide learning experiences for all, not just the child, but for everybody. So we wear different hats, and we need to wear these different hats to be successful for this one or small group of children that you're working with.
And one of the hats that we wear are learners ourselves. So I taught APE for 9 years in Texas, and we have to continue to learn what is the most appropriate, how our assessment's changing. And so when you guys come to professional development opportunities like this, we hope you guys are learning so you can take this information back and serve your students. So when we're talking about this type of assessment, we would like you guys to ask yourself what assessments, why are assessments needed? When are assessments needed? Who are you assessing and why are you assessing? So we'll have you guys talk a little bit about that, think a little bit about that, and then we'll fill you in on our side of the assessment story.
So here in the United States, we have a federal law that we all follow, and it's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act. And hopefully you have read about that or seen that when you studied in your schools. And in this law, it's really important that we know that physical education is defined in this law, which is really great. We're the only curricular area that's defined under the umbrella of special education. So we define physical education, and that's what's really fantastic about students here with disabilities in the United States, because we can justify services that they need specifically in adaptive P and what we focus on and what we assess. It's quite nice and to our advantage, to their advantage, actually.
So some different things that we assess across the lifespan. In my current position at Slippery Rock, we work in adapted physical activities. So not only in the schools, but we get our students or our children at the infant toddler stage all the way through adulthood. So we have to think about what we are assessing across the lifespan. So when we're thinking about our infants and toddlers, we're looking for those spontaneous movements, reflexes, and motor milestones. Then we get into early childhood and pre-K areas. We're looking for fundamental motor skills, orientation skills, locomotor and ball skills, play skills, and water readiness. Then at the elementary age, we're looking at those locomotor skills, non-locomotor skills, object control skills or ball skills, movement concepts, rhythm and dance, aquatics, fitness, and then eventually leisure activities. Then we get into the adolescent stage, and we're looking at sport-related skills, fitness, leisure activities, aquatics, activities of daily living, and dance. And then for our adults, we're looking at leisure activities, fitness, activities of daily living, aquatics, sport skills, mobility, and balance. So this bell curve of our lifespan really focuses on the fundamental skills that we're building at the early childhood stage, moving through elementary, middle school, high school, transition into adulthood. So we want to make sure that we're breaking down the skills so we can see what areas we need to help supplement if there are discrepancies in their assessments.
And to add to that, as adaptive physical educators, we will stop at a certain level, but we need to make sure that when we provide those services to all those across that lifespan, that we pick appropriate assessments, and we'll stop at a certain age. But remember, we can provide services to the young children. Lots of programs don't, but we absolutely can do that. I want to add that to that talk with Amanda. So back to IDEIA, our Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, these are the areas that we assess, and these are the areas we focus on. So there's different assessments that focus on physical and motor fitness. There's different assessments that that will hit certain areas of fundamental motor skills and patterns, and group games and sports, and skills in aquatics and dance. So based on the law, it's really important that when you look at the child, what is it that when Amanda asked you initially, what you need to ask yourself, what are you assessing? Are you assessing physical fitness? Are you assessing fundamental motor skills? What age are they at? What Amanda just talked about. What age are they at? What's important? And if that's important, then we need to find out what's the most appropriate assessment to assess this child, to find out what can they do during this time of their life, their stage across the lifespan. So it's really important that these are the areas that we assess, look at across the lifespan, where do they fit in, what's functional, what's appropriate, and that's when you start determining what assessment to use.
So next we'll talk about appropriate assessment. So kind of building on what Dr. Lisa said, we really want to think about the most important part is that we're giving appropriate assessments. So we want to make sure each student receives the most appropriate physical education program, and we can figure out what program is most appropriate through our assessment. So we have to have appropriate assessments to figure out appropriate placement. And the program must be in the student's least restrictive environment. So in the United States, that's part of our law, LRE, that students are provided services in the least restrictive environment.
So the purpose is, we need to also, what is the purpose of our assessment? And here in the United States, we look at the present level of academic achievement and their functional performance. We're identifying the student's strengths and weaknesses. That's what the level, based on that information, that present level, then we can just determine where to program, where to set, where their placement level is going to be. Is it in the least restricted environment? What is the best program for them to get the best out of them in physical education? You select specific activities and skills, and we do modifications and accommodations as needed so that they can participate safely and successfully. Maybe they'll be in general physical education part-time, and maybe they'll see you a little bit. Maybe you'll have small groups, but we have to look at the individual child and look at all those skills.
And the way we do that is through the assessment. So really kind of paints a picture for everything that we do.
I just want to add one thing I didn't say earlier, is that just because we did the one assessment doesn't mean that they're going to need, we have to look at the whole picture of the child. Like Amanda said earlier, that we have to look at the physical education setting. How are they doing in physical education? How are they doing in different environments, sporting environments? And then when you do the assessment, look at the whole picture before you determine placement.
So some more purposes of assessment would be placement, prediction, and measure achievement. So for placement, we want to figure out what is the most appropriate placement in physical education for our students with disabilities. And that can range anywhere in our continuum of services, from general ed PE with support, adapted PE support, self-contained adapted PE, maybe it's a one-on-one. So there's a lot of different placements that are appropriate for our students. We can use our assessment to figure out what the most appropriate placement is. We can also use assessments for prediction. So we want to use those assessments to develop goals and objectives to figure out what our students need to achieve, what they're able to achieve, and what we need to help get them there. So that's a really strong part of assessments. And with that, we can also measure achievement. So we want to be collecting data throughout our sessions, throughout the semester, to make sure that our students are achieving those objectives and those goals, and that they're finding success. And if they're not, then what can we do to really get in there and make sure that we're helping them find success?
So assessments include, and I spoke it earlier, collecting information. Look at the student's records. Find out about the student. Do some informal observations. Many times in the real world, adaptive physical educators, they don't have a lot of time. So they run into the school, they assess the child, they met them for the first time, maybe second, and that's the data they function on to determine what's going to happen to them for the next year or 3 years. But it's really important to take the time, step back, get their records, go observe them in physical education, observe them during their recess time with their peers, observe them on the playground, see some of the things they do. And then you may want to grab some formal assessments like the CTAPE, which is a competency test for adaptive physical education out of Louisiana. The TGMD3 now, you have that, and that's a nice test to look at some motor developments, fundamental motor skills. It's a really nice test. And then you have the fitness test. So grab some formal assessments, and then maybe you're going to have to do some functional assessments you could add to it just to get a little bit more out of them. But remember, we don't want to just use those test scores to make the decision, because maybe they're doing really well in physical education, but they didn't do so well in the test. But we don't want to pull them out of PE. Maybe they just need some additional work and work with the physical education teacher so they can stay included in physical education. You could just assist that way. So assessment includes working with the teacher and the parent and get their input. That's another part of this process. It's always so nice to call the parent. I don't know if you all do that, Amanda, with your adaptive PE teachers, getting those parents involved. That's really, really important, because maybe the parent really wants their child to do more sporting activities like they do, like your program. And so maybe we could focus more on sporting activities and do assessments related to sporting events instead of your standardized assessment. So get that community parent input and work on community-based information. Do an ecological survey. Dr. Marty Block has in his book about ecological surveys, he's got examples, and you can look right in there and learn how to do that. It's really important that you could develop rubrics and task analyze some skills to develop your IEP. And transitional documents are really important to help include all of this into your information for data to make these decisions.
And a lot of times as APE teachers or GPE teachers, you guys are the ones that know physical activity, you know motor skill development. And so you guys are the people who understand what that looks like and what it looks like correctly. A lot of times our teachers and parents don't understand that a run has to have an in-flight phase where our students are getting both feet off the ground. They might think, oh, my child's running away from me, they can run, but in our professional opinion, they're not actually running with proper form. So if you guys use your knowledge to help teachers and parents understand what they should be looking for, what they should be advocating for their children, that will really kind of help make a more well-rounded student and give them physical activity opportunities outside of just working with you in APE or GPE.
Screening. This is an interesting topic. Some people do this, some people don't. I don't know, Dr. Young, when you were at TCU, did you do screening before you did assessment?
No, every kid just got an assessment, but I think in the public schools, I think it's really important.
Yeah, so screenings are nice, because a lot of times people will just send students to be referred for adaptive PE without even thinking about it. But if they just did a little informal screening to see if does the student really need adaptive PE, or is it because they forgot to wear their glasses that day, or it's because they had a bad day, they just had a bad day, or there's some behavioral problems. So screening is just, and we do this screening all the time in your academic classes. They screen with math to see what level they're at. They do reading tests real quick to see what their level. So let's do a screening in adaptive PE to see what level they're at, and do we need to go further and do an assessment. So that's what this is all about. But there's only one little trick to a screening. If the IEP committee, and here in the United States, if the IEP team recommends adaptive PE, we skip the screening and go straight to the assessment, because the process has started. So usually a screening will come from a teacher, physical education teacher, a parent. Someone's just concerned, hey, can you check out this student real quick? You do a screening, you record it, and then you decide. So just like I said, the purpose helps confirm where the student's developmental status is. It identifies the student's need, and do we need to, so they don't go unnoticed. And it stops in many cases being dumped on. We use that term because we have a lot of students on our caseload as itinerant teachers here in the United States. Sometimes we have like 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, and it could go on because teachers just refer. So we stopped a lot of that by saying, hey, let's do a screening. So if you refer, you do the screening, we'll work together. And that stopped a lot of that caseload increasing like crazy.
And the screenings can also be a great use for those informal observations. So you can see what's going on in the classes, what's going on at recess. So that really kind of helps build your assessment.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say, I said it increases your caseload. I meant to say that increases the amount of time you have to assess.
Right.
So that's what I meant. So sorry about that. So here's a nice little example. So we had a nice opportunity here in Texas to write a really nice practical handbook. It's just a great little handbook. We worked as a team through our state organization. And here's our screening. And the only thing, and you probably can't see it, but what's nice on the bottom right-hand side, recommendations. So no further actions. I can't read what it says either, but in general, it says either no further actions, work with the physical education teacher, work with the classroom teacher. So it's quite nice. And so if you want to copy that, just let me know and we can ship that to you. But that's sort of just a basic screening, and it's a collaborative screening of general PE teacher and the APE teacher.
And sometimes the diagnostician. And just to go over it really quick, we're looking at present level. So we're looking at motor skills, cognitive development, affective development, motor and physical fitness, and mobility skills. So all of those are really important things for students to be successful in PE. So that's kind of what we're looking at in this screening tool.
So when do you assess? That's a good question. Is there a need for adaptive physical education services? You need to find out if a formal assessment is needed. Parental permission must be obtained. You just can't do. We here in the United States, we just can't do an assessment if it's formal. The screening, yes, but rule of thumb is let the parents know that you did a screening. But if you continue on and you do a formal assessment, standardized assessment, the ones we mentioned before, like the TGMD2, the Brockport, the CTAPE, you need parental permission. So it's always important to communicate with the parents and let them know what's going on and let them be part of this process. And especially if you go on and do an ecological survey and you talk to the parents and find out what do they want their child to achieve in physical education. What do they do at home? What do they do on the weekends? They're in T-ball, they bowl, what do they do?
And similar to those notes, and I was thinking about this earlier, but we also want to involve the student if that's appropriate. So we've talked a lot about appropriateness. We talk about working with families, with parents, with teachers, but we also can involve the students when that's appropriate. So we want to increase self-advocacy, let the students speak up and tell us what they need. My mom is an APE teacher out in California, and she just had a middle school student in a wheelchair who their PE class was doing ultimate frisbee, and he was having a really hard time participating. So he asked for help, and his GPE teacher reached out to my mom, who's the APE teacher, and they were able to figure out different ways to include him and make sure that he was able to successfully participate, and he was fully capable of doing that. So when we can involve the students, that's always a great idea too. So before we assess, we also really want to make sure we get this medical form so we know there are several contraindications that go alongside the students with disabilities. So we want to make sure that we're keeping our students safe when we're doing an assessment. So we want to make sure we have some kind of medical form, or we check in their file to see if they have atlanioaxial instability or if there's some kind of heart condition that we need to be mindful of before running the PACER test. So make sure you get that before you do your assessment. That's really important. I'm gonna let Lisa talk about this.
Yeah, this is how do we select this appropriate assessment? And I hope that we get to discuss that with you, because we really, Dr. Young and I really want to know what you use. So that's going to be exciting for us. So we can certainly tell you, we will tell you what we use, but we really want to know what you all use. So it's really appropriate assessment. So it's just now we're getting into the major part of this presentation, is to selecting an appropriate assessment. It's essential that we make sure we do select the one. You just don't grab one and you just go assess. We want to make sure we get accurate student information. And then because with this data, we're going to be determining the appropriate placement and programming development for this child, this student. So it's really important that we get accurate information, and accurate information from the student is going to be appropriate assessments. So we have to look at these assessments. We need to make sure the assessment is valid, reliable, that everybody on the committee approves this assessment, that the state and your local school systems support these assessments, because here in the United States, we have different assessments all over, and some districts use their own, some districts use standardized, some districts use, so they need support from the district, because based on the law, we really should use as valid, reliable tests. But if the IEP committee agrees that we want to use an ecological survey, or we would like to use Special Olympics information, we can leave that valid, reliable. We can use that because the team, that's what's really important. The team supports it. Your local school district supports it. But now we're down to, is this assessment appropriate?
And a lot of times for appropriate assessments, we want to think about age. And that has, different assessments are geared towards different age students. And we want to make sure we stick to that. So we don't want to give a preschool assessment to a high schooler because that's not appropriate. So we have to be really mindful of that.
So I'll talk about the primaries. We call them primary and secondary. We kind of use that term here, meaning primary, this is our go-to. So when we first see the student, we watch the student in different settings, we go to our appropriate assessments. Our primary goal is to make sure it's age appropriate. Is it developmentally appropriate? It's related to the general physical education curriculum. Is it standardized and validated? Is it norm or criteria reference? So those are the things we ask. That's the first thing we do. We have to leave that because maybe the students they're in a wheelchair and the TGMD2 or TGMD3 is not appropriate. So it's just not going to work. We'll go to a secondary assessment. Maybe it's supplemental assessments, authentic assessments, or ecological, or maybe you will use part of a criterion reference test like project mobility, and maybe you'll go do some ecological. You can mix that. It's okay to do that, or you can use two different assessments. But our first thing is it age appropriate? Just like Dr. Young just said, you don't want to use the TGMD3 on a 17-year-old, and people do that. They do that. That's reality, but it's not functional. It's not appropriate. So you want to make sure that you look at other appropriate assessments. And so that,
and there's a very real possibility that we use a primary assessment and our students score 0. That's a total possibility. So that's when we bring in those secondary assessments to really get that supplemental information, ecological inventories to break down specific skills that we really want to look at. So we're going to go through some different assessments that we have done and that we use here in the United States. So we'll talk a little bit about traditional assessments. I'll let Lisa take this one.
We have a lot of tests, and these are the ones that we pulled up that we feel that a lot of people use within our circle of university faculty. And so these are the most that we use. And a lot of these tests are available. You can get to them. Like Region 10, that supplemental assessment, those are quite nice. They're supplemental, meaning they're going to be your primary, but they have nice functional assessments. And I don't know, Amanda, I don't know if we get to speak live, we can ask you if you've seen these tests, if you've used these tests. There's some nice one. I'm not familiar with the KLMS, so that's Dr. Young. I don't know what that one is.
Yeah, that's a preschool one. So, and like, I guess that might have been in our other presentation, but we talked about the importance of preschool assessments and physical education or physical activity for our preschoolers, because we really want to build those foundational skills. In my 9 years, I taught preschoolers, and I think it's so important to assess their motor skills and develop that foundation so that they can be successful in kindergarten and forward in their schooling.
So we have options. That's the whole main point here, is we have options, and we've used these different tests. So look at the option and what's appropriate, what fits in after looking at them, what's the best one to use. Authentic assessments I love are used based on the roles and responsibilities of what's going on in their real world. And how you find out that? You watch them in different settings and you talk to the parents. And I love authentic assessments. And those, they're not standardized. So you work with your IEP team, they know you're going to do it, and you can you can go online and pick up rubrics. And there's books, Lauren Lieberman and Kathy Houston, they have a book on different types of rubrics and how you can use that. But I love doing real world setting stuff and developing a task analysis and rubrics and what can they do, and you develop your IEP right off that. It's so functional.
Yeah, and these are like our ecological inventories that are so necessary for our high school and transition age students, because we
Mhm,
want them, our end goal is that they're going to live an active lifestyle. So if
mhm.
we can figure out which physical activity they enjoy and that they are going to do when they leave school, that's what we want to focus on for those transition students. So whether that be soccer or golf or, you know, hiking, we want to be able to break down that skill or that activity that they enjoy and figure out how we can help them be more successful with some kind of authentic assessment. So with that, there are 3 examples of authentic assessments that we can use. There are rubrics, ecological task analysis, and portfolios. All are really great examples of ways that we can assess and document progress for our students. So here's an example of a rubric. This one is specifically from our Region 10 in Texas. They put out a bunch of really nice assessments that we can use. So they're also known as checklists, task analysis, and rating scales. So you can see if we have a particular student who's interested in disc golf, then maybe we can pull this ecological inventory and see, can our student locate a course near their house? And it's either a yes or no. And then there's an area for comments. Do they indicate a desire to play? I mean, that's a huge part. If they find joy in it, then let's go for it. Are they able to obtain directions, ask for the cost, arrange for money, dress appropriately? So not only are we thinking about the physical skills of actually playing disc golf, but we're getting them from start to finish. Can they access a disc golf course and be successful? And maybe that is independently, which is what we want to work towards, or maybe that's with a friend or with a family member. But either way, when we have this inventory, we can really get down into it and see what they need help with and how we can help them be successful.
The nice thing about rubrics too, that's where you're not working with that student alone. The parent can help work on the dressing and getting there. You can work on the, everybody's working on the same, and it's quite nice. It's actually with the ecological inventory, the teacher sets the objectives and provides the student with choices within the environment. So these are really nice ways of gathering data that are functional, their environment. You find out what they're doing in their natural environment, and then you build your program with them that way through these ecological inventories.
And I don't know about you guys, but for us in the United States, the amount of time students receive APE or GPE services is pretty limited. So when we can do these ecological inventories and get them doing some kind of physical activity that they can also do at home or in the community, that really kind of sets them up for lifetime physical activity, which is our goal.
Portfolios are a nice way to gather data to develop your IEP for the student. It's a collection of their work. It represents their life, their work, what they've done over this time. You can have videos, test results, peer evaluations, journals, logs, and it just has a lot of nice information to develop your IEPs. Strength is it has multiple assessments on multiple occasions, so you can see them over time, and then you can determine what your IEP is going to be that way. So it's quite nice to do a portfolio approach. Appropriate assessments. All right, so you have some ideas.
Bringing it back around.
Yeah, we're bringing it around. So you need to know your student and collaborate with the teachers. I know that you've done that a lot, Amanda, with your teachers throughout your teaching out in the field, and your parents.
Yeah, and for our schools, I was the only PE teacher APE. I did half PE, half APE, and I was the only one. So I really had to rely on the other teachers and the parents to really kind of get a good broad understanding of what to assess, how to help these students be successful. And with that, also, we did some research with homework. So like I said, we only get our students for a so limited amount of time. Maybe the parents are interested in implementing some kind of homework. Maybe the classroom teacher is interested in doing some kind of physical activity. And when we can get our kids up and moving, that's what we want. So if they can do it in class, at home, when we can all work together, that really benefits the student.
Mm-hmm. That's our whole goal, is what's benefiting the students. So that's why it's important to also watch the student in multiple settings. Don't just focus on that one shot TGMD2 or TGMD3 and one shot deal, and then you make their decision. No, you want to do it in multiple settings. And then you want to make sure that your assessment is appropriate. So this data that you're gathering can support your program and your placement. So that's really important. That supportive bridge between your data, everything that you've collected, working with the parents, the teachers, and your different settings that you've seen, and whatever appropriate assessment you pick for that child or that student, I'm sorry, it can support, you have justification when you go to your committee and when you work with the parents. This is why we're putting them in this setting. This is why this is the placement they're going to be in because of these results. So it justifies what you've just done. It's really important that you have that data correct.
Yeah, and these assessments and our data collection is ongoing. It's not just a one-time thing and then we're done. In the United States, we have triennial reviews. So the students have a full assessment every 3 years. And every year they go back and look at goals and objectives. But we have to be collecting data all the time so we can support what we're doing with these students and make sure that we're helping them be successful in any environment. So we have to keep adjusting and making sure we know how we're helping our students. So with that, here are some of our references. There's some really great resources out there that we're happy to share with you guys. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We obviously love this topic, love our students, and we want everyone to be successful and use appropriate assessments. So feel free to email us. You can find us on Twitter. We both share some really great stuff on there. So hopefully we can have this time to talk with you guys, see what you guys do. And yeah, if you have questions, let's get it.
Thank you so much.